Hi boys and girls, this is Miss Christie, and tonight's homework is adding tenths and hundredths. Use what you know about equivalent fractions to add. Write an equation to show your work. 2 tenths plus 15 hundredths. Equation in words. So 2 tenths, excuse me, we know we have to convert that into hundredths. So 2 tenths equals how many hundredths? 20 hundredths. So 20 hundredths plus 15 hundredths equals 20 plus 15 is 35 hundredths. 68 100ths plus 3 tenths. So again, we have to have our common denominator of 100. 68 hundredths stays the same. 3 tenths, well, 10 times 10 is 100. 3 times 10 is 30. 68 plus 30. 60 plus 30 is 90, and then 98 hundredths. And if you wanted to simplify that, you could, but you don't have to. 1 tenth plus 50 hundredths. So remember we talked about with 50 hundredths, instead of converting the tenths to hundredths, we can actually convert 50 hundredths to 5 tenths by dividing both sides by 10. So that's 1 tenth plus 5 tenths, which equals 6 tenths. 4 tenths plus 60 hundredths plus 3 tenths plus 81 hundredths. Okay, so let's make all of our denominators hundredths, since even though we could convert 60 hundredths to 6 tenths, we can't do that with this one, because 81 hundredths, we can't convert that to tenths easily. So 100, so there's 4 fractions there. So 4 tenths is 40 hundredths, 60 hundredths, 30 hundredths, and 81 hundredths. So you can do this a couple of different ways. 40 plus 60 is 100, plus 30 is 130, and then 130 plus 81 is 211. So 211 hundredths. So remember how we talked about this is an improper fraction. So 211 hundredths is the same as 2 wholes, because 200 hundredths is equal to 2 wholes, and then 11 hundredths. 1 3 tenths plus 5 64 hundredths. So let's convert our tenths to hundredths. So 1 30 hundredths plus 5 64 hundredths. 1 plus 5 is 6. 64 plus 30 is 94 hundredths. 3 22 hundredths plus 2 8 tenths. So we're going to again convert our tenths to hundredths. 3 plus 2 is 5. 80 plus 22 is 102. So once again, we have an improper fraction. 100 100ths equals another whole. So we're going to take that whole and we're going to add it to the 5, making that 6. And then we have 2 left over, 6 2 hundredths. 15 tenths plus 78 hundredths. So let's convert this to hundredths. 15 tenths is equal to 150 hundredths plus 78 hundredths. So 150 plus 78, 7 plus 5 is 12, 1 and 1 is 2. So that's 228 hundredths. We know that 200 hundredths is equal to 2 wholes, and 28 hundredths left over. Nicholas shaded 40 hundredths of his hundredths grid. Victor shaded 5/10ths of his hundred grid. Who shaded more? Okay, so can't really compare tenths to hundredths, but 40 hundredths we can convert to tenths. So 4/10ths is less than 5/10ths, so Victor shaded more. How much did they shade in all? 5/10ths plus 4/10ths equals 9/10ths. Write 3 equivalent fractions. So we know when we're writing equivalent fractions, anything with where the numerator is half the denominator is equal to 1/2. So 1/2, 2/4, 3/6, 50 hundredths. You can really write whatever, as long as your numerator is half your denominator. 1/4, well, 1/4 times 2/2 is 2/8 times 2/2 again is 4/16 times 2/2 again is 8/32. 1/3 times 2/2 is 2/6 times 2/2 is 4/12 times 2/2 is 8/24. 1/5 times 2/2 is 2/10 times 2/2 again is 4/20 times 2/2 again is 8/40. And that's it. So hopefully you understood all that. And if not, make sure you come and ask me questions tomorrow, and have a great night.